that really pushed things towards the association focused on we've got to have the right to representation immediately. I think I'm the first attorney, and this will probably be the thing I'm most proud of as a lawyer, first attorney to regularly respond to an officer about shooting.
Hey everybody, it's Blue Grit Podcast, Clint McNear and
Tyler Owen.
We're back. How are you, T.O.?
I'm good, man. Good. Just hanging out.
Let's do this.
How you be?
I'm good.
Everything good with you?
Morning. Yep, drove in this morning, zero traffic.
How was that Ford doing?
Ford Road good.
Oh, it did?
Yep.
Drove like a Crown Vic, I guess, right?
No, it didn't. It drove like a Caprice. It flew down here.
Oh, it did?
Yep.
Huh.
Like a Chevy Caprice police car.
Oh, really? Huh.
It was good.
Oh, okay.
No traffic in Waco.
Well, that's a shocker.
Yep. We are proud to have, I would guess, the longest serving Tmpa attorney on the show, Mr. Bob Gorsky.
How are you?
We're good, sir. We're good. How was your trip down?
It was wonderful. Very smooth like yours. I was in my Jewish boy Cadillac. And, right down 35 without a problem.
Waco's like a new place now when you can actually drive through it without touching your brake.
I was very happy. I thought this might be one of those 4-hour trips, but it was much less.
Yep.
So
I like those
good, yeah.
2-hour, 40-minute trips.
Right.
Tell us who Bob is. Tell us a little bit about you, our listeners, who you are, and then we'll dive into who you are as we know you.
Well, I grew up in Kenmore, New York, which is a suburb of Buffalo, just adjacent to Buffalo. And I graduated from the University of Buffalo, State University of New York at Buffalo in 1970. And, 74. High school graduation was 1970. And I was actually a sociology major when I was in college. I thought I was going to become a social worker. And
you kind of still.
Thank God you did not do that. Yeah.
I was a co-director in college of a Big Brother, Big Sister program. It's now part of the Big Brothers of America program, but at that time it had been formed at the university, and it was growing, and I joined in as a Big Brother for a young boy, and also became the co-director of the program until I graduated. So while I was in college, I knew people who had gone into social work, and they all complained about the bureaucracies and the budgets and difficulties, and I thought, maybe that's not for me.
That sounds like police work.
Well, and I thought I could go into into law and still do something maybe in juvenile. And actually, when I started law school, I thought I might end up in criminal defense or juvenile law, something of that sort. So I wasn't going to work until my second year, but late in my first year, April it was actually 1976, I had taken a year, and I was in my first year of law school. A friend of mine walked into a party, and we were in a study group together, and he said, "Hey, this firm needs another clerk. It's Phil Burleson's law firm, and you interested in working?" And I had seen Phil's name in the newspaper. He was known as a criminal defense lawyer. He represented Jack Ruby along with Melvin Belli, and he had made his name after he left the DA's office in that area. But Phil did a lot of different things, but I knew that name, and I thought, I wasn't going to start working this soon, but maybe this is an opportunity I don't want to pass up.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure initially I even realized that he was the first lawyer for the Dallas Police Association, the first lawyer for the Texas DPS Officers Association, and that the firm was representing police officers at that time. So
what year was that roughly?
1976. And so 2 weeks after I went to work there as a part-time clerk, as I was finishing my first year, the Colin Davis shooting occurred in Fort Worth. And shortly after that, because Phil was brought in to work with Racehorse Haynes and other lawyers in the firm, Phil basically was gone for a year, and mostly in Amarillo, when the case was moved to Amarillo. But I clerked there, and I graduated from SMU in 1978. I began to work on police cases, mostly with Jack Pate at the time. And at that time, officers called us basically, after they'd been suspended, after they've been terminated, there was no representation in internal affairs. There was no representation immediately after an officer-involved shooting. But when I graduated, and they all joked that I just refused to leave, and I stayed on with the firm. I was the first lawyer those guys had ever hired. Usually they just had lawyers in the firm that had established practices or had left the DA's office to open a practice. So I
The clerk that wouldn't leave.
clerk that wouldn't leave, which is actually what I've referred to Zach Horn as. And so I stayed on and began to really focus on representation of law enforcement officers. We had very few firefighters back at that time. We have a bunch now coming to us, but at that time we had very few, and it was all police.
You can move that around.
And so
For you.
I worked with Jack Pate, and Jack was doing a lot of family law at that time, and I really just dug in and focused on our police representation. I remember going to a DPA board meeting and standing up, and I didn't know a lot of those guys. And, you know, I've been around there as a law student, but really I was a lawyer now, and I was more engaged with them and explaining to them how we need to do some things differently and how we were going to conduct ourselves. I've sort of carried that forward.
Well, and for our listeners, what's
yeah.
interesting to your point about back then, you were really kind of only involved after they'd been suspended or terminated. And
Yeah.
and for our listeners out there, it's kind of like the ball game's over, and you're only brought in to appeal the results of the ball game.
Yeah,
you're not allowed to participate.
It was very
in the ball game.
reactive, not proactive.
Yeah.
Yes, the ninth inning. Now we're trying to bring in
You know, we spend a lot of time now and have for many years trying to, as we represent officers, also teach the associations and the officers we represent what you need to do to stay out of trouble. Back in those days, it was more reacting to the trouble that existed.
Right.
And, law enforcement and the public's response to critical incidents in particular, very different back in the late 70s. And officers didn't assume that they had rights at that time. Most officers thought, I left my rights at the door when I
100%.
signed up for the job.
Yeah.
And that changed in the early 80s. The politics in Dallas in particular changed. And there were a number of officer-involved shootings that got a lot of public attention, a lot of criticism. There was a congressional hearing that was held in Dallas. John Bryant, who's now in the state legislature, was a congressman. He brought the Judicial Committee, I can't remember which committee exactly, Criminal Justice. John Conyers was the chairman, but he brought him down to Dallas to have a major public hearing about the police department and use of force. And we had a controversial shooting at one point in time in that era. An officer shot an 80-some-year-old woman who had come to the door with a gun in her hand, killed her. And, of course, he was on probation. He was fired. Got a lot of attention, though, and a lot of criticism of the police department. Even though the shooting was justified, he was not charged with anything. And so officers began to think, I don't know that the city's got my back. And we had one particular case, probably the most memorable case, one of the most memorable cases of my career, where an officer came home from court and found a burglar in his house. Didn't have a cell phone back at that point in time. Some people might have, but he didn't have one. And he handcuffed him in front, and he went to call for help, and the guy came up with a gun, which I think was, as I remember, the officer's gun, or one of his guns that was in his house. He shot and killed the burglar, and he was brought down to the police department. I got a call, and I'm not sure if an association person called or how that came about, but I got a call. I went down there to the police department. A city attorney, police investigators, and internal affairs all took him in a room and said, you can't come in here. He doesn't have a right to a lawyer. And he panicked, and he lied about the circumstances. And
panicked, meaning it was a justified shooting, but he
justified
panicked.
shooting. Oh yeah, he was ultimately cleared. We polygraphed him on the what the facts were and how that all played out, and he was cleared on everything, but they fired him for lying. And I'm convinced this is a good cop. I'm convinced he would have, if I would have been with him, would have explained it, shouldn't have cuffed him the way he did.
Yeah.
That's where he
messed up, yeah.
Yeah, that's where he messed
Stress
up.
and everything, yeah.
Right? And we would have explained it, and, the firing was for lying, not for the shooting.
Yeah.
And that really pushed things towards the association focused on we've got to have the right to representation immediately after a shooting. Officer's going to be identified as a suspect essentially in a homicide. Yeah.
At what point did Garrity get kind of introduced to? Do you remember that? Can you recall?
And I'm sorry to say I don't remember what year the case came out, but it was. I think Garrity might have even been before.
Was it introed before that incident?
It may have been before that happened. That's a good question.
Yeah, yeah.
As I get older, some of the But so we pressed on DPD to allow us access, and the chief, Glenn King, was the chief at the time, and he pushed back, and we threatened to sue them. We told them we're filing a suit on Monday if we are not given the right through policy to have access to our client after a shooting. Friday afternoon, before that Monday, we got a call from one of the assistant city attorneys. Yeah, we're going to implement a policy. You can be out there.
So basically what you're saying is that you basically essentially were the pioneer.
I've asked other lawyers around the state if any of them know of anyone that was regularly responding to shootings back at that time, and I can't find one. As far as I know, it wasn't happening in Houston, wasn't happening in Austin. I think I'm the first attorney, and this will probably be the thing I'm most proud of as a lawyer, the first attorney to regularly respond to an officer-involved shooting. And I'll tell you about the first one I went to. This is how much I had to learn. I walk into an apartment. It was a Jamaican drug gang. I don't know if they had a shootout with the cops or a shootout with each other. Cops came. I'm
going to guess like 80, 81 when the Jamaicans came in and were killing everybody.
This was 83.
83, yep.
And I walked into the apartment and I see a puddle of red. And I said, one of the detectives, that's where he was shot. And he goes, no, that's where a bottle of wine spilled over. The body's over there. It was like a Naked Gun movie. Remember the Naked Gun movies where the cameras would, like I panned to the bottle, was tipped over into wine on the floor. And I'm thinking, Gorsky, you got a few things to learn. I wasn't a police officer.
Right.
I'm just, a kid from New York who's kind of learning my way as I go. Over the years, I've hired lawyers that came out of law enforcement, which is a great thing to have.
Oh, absolutely.
Hit the ground running, and then there's other ones like me, and Zach that have kind of had to learn as we go through it. So that changed the landscape. And the next department that I remember in the Dallas area that kind of came forward with a policy was Plano. And Chief Glasscock actually reached out to me. And we had, we got along, but we always had our differences, battles with him. But he reached out and said, we're going to have a policy. And we had if I remember, we had a case or two where, we have an officer involved in a shooting. We were okay to go out there, but then someone would move him. I remember one where one of the supervisors moved our client. We were trying to find him, and they kind of hit him somewhere, So he said, we got to have a policy. And he said, that's fine. We'll do it. And so we work with them on their policy. And then over time, others have followed suit where, I haven't run into, and I don't think we've run into a situation in many years where we got any, pushback.
And Bob's a humble guy that won't brag on himself, but for our listeners, I want to reiterate a huge point. Prior to, what year was the shooting where you pushed back, threatened a lawsuit, and then you guys were allowed to then respond to shootings?
That would be 83.
83.
Yeah.
Prior to that time, you're involved in a shooting, no matter how justified or not, you didn't have access to an attorney until you either got fired, suspended, or whatever. And let's be crystal clear, after you take another human's life, justified or not, in Dallas County and every other county around here, the title of that report at that time, it is what it is. You've taken another human's life. It's a homicide investigation. And you have rights just like everybody else. And prior to 83, and Bob pushing back and changing that focus is where we're at now, where as soon as you're in a shooting, you call the 800 number, you get Tmpa, hey, I need an attorney out here with me ASAP. That's the reason we have that right now. It's super important. And Garland, years ago, when we were looking to go to get away from who we were affiliated with, we were researching the other companies. And when we looked at Tmpa, I guess 15 or 20 years ago, they said, well, you'll have access in the Dallas area to Bob Gorsky's office. And my dad started at Dallas PD in 67, and literally my entire lifetime I could hear my dad when I was a kid saying, Margaret, if some shit ever happens to me, you get Bob Gorsky on the phone and get Bob Gorsky out there with me. So as we sat there with Tmpa staff, and they said, yeah, you know, there's attorneys located around the state, but for you in Garland, you'd have access to Bob Gorsky. And I thought, okay, I've heard that name literally my entire life from my dad. And there is value when you're looking for your legal protection and understanding who are the attorneys affiliated with that organization. And having somebody that's a pioneer in it, how many years now?
48.
48.
Almost November be 48.
Almost got this figured out.
I'm still learning.
48 years. 48 years, that's awesome.
Still learning. And, you know, fast forward the next 10 years, and the scrutiny in officer-involved shootings, of course, became really heightened.
Yeah.
Where DA's offices and the police departments are you know, turning over stones that they didn't turn over back in 83. You know, back in 83, in that era, investigators would come out to a shooting and often, okay, let's check this out. Okay, this is the basics. Okay, this is a good shooting. You know,
yeah, we're not doing phone dumps.
Go to the station, write go to station, write a letter. Now, you know, you start adding things like dash cam video. You know, it changed a lot of things. The first problems we had when the dash cams came out is we want to see the video before we're going to provide a statement, and we got pushed back on that. And pushback what was really only from maybe one source at DPD, but it was the number 2 chief, and he was over CID, and he said, I don't think you all should be able to look at the video. And the investigators didn't care, and we reached out to the DA's office, and they didn't care. They said it's okay, but he wouldn't do it. So I was at the racetrack actually one day when Phil Burleson Jr., Phil's son that was working for us at the time, called me, and he was out in a shooting and they wanted to see the video, and they're telling him, Chief said, Walter says we can't see the video. I said, well, then tell them they're not getting a statement. And that just put him in a tizzy. Because investigators want to get a statement. They want to do the things we did at that time. At that time, we were giving statements. That's evolved. We don't do that as quickly as we did back in those days. And about an hour and a half later, finally, word came down, okay, let them see the video. And so we've been seeing the videos ever since. So, you know, we have to push back when certain problems come up, and we've had to push back at different times with DPD and other departments. But
and I think that's part of the reputation that you have in a 48-year career you've built in your firm, and Zach and John and Robert and all those guys, is sometimes people think an attorney should only be a whole bulldog, and that is not always the best option at a scene. And there is times when catching flies with honey is the better option, and I think you guys have always balanced well. In one of the instances early on when we switched to Tmpa and had access to you guys, a Garland officer was just under the bridge on Ferguson Road in Dallas, was doing an undercover deal and ended up involved in a shooting. They were going to dope rip him, and he shot him at the gas station. And they got out there and told him that he wasn't going to be able to see any video. I was association president at the time, so I'm getting a kind of panicked phone calls. Well, then I got a phone call, and I don't remember which attorney it was out there, and it may have been you, but it was somebody it was you or your firm said, they're telling Garland you can load up and head to the house, because if we can't see the video, then we don't talk about what occurred. And like 30 minutes later, I got a call back and said, oh, they've reversed that now. They've decided now it is okay for you guys to see video. And I thought that's how push back a little bit and we get through this.
No, I've never been a believer that you you have one approach that fits all situations and all people that you need to deal with. There may come a time where you need to pound a table, and there are times when you need to be practical, you be realistic and diplomatic, and you've got to be able to adjust depending upon who you're dealing with and what the situation is. And that's the way I think we've all operated at my firm, from day one.
Well, and if brokering a deal and trying to get out of there is truly my best legal option, I don't want I wouldn't want my attorney telling me, let's go drop a nuclear missile in this mess, and then I end up indicted or something. Something works out of it.
It's like everything in life. You got to have some common sense.
Yes, sir.
Do your business.
Yep.
Yeah.
To apply it is where it comes down to it.
Yep. And the other major thing I'll throw in that changed the landscape is our ability to be present during an IA investigation. That changed several years later. DPA led the battle with the department, and it was just kind of a repeated, we need to have this ability, and push back, and we finally convinced the department that, when one of your guys or gals gets sued over an incident, the statement they gave your investigator is going to be Exhibit 1 in the lawsuit. It helps you if they're writing. We're not changing the facts. It's like anything, a shooting, whether shooting, an IA complaint. We're not going to change the facts, and the lawyer, we're not going to create facts that don't exist. I mean, that's the one way we can get our clients fired, is if we were to tell them not to be truthful.
Yep.
But how it's couched, how it's written, can make a huge difference in terms of how it's perceived, particularly if they're involved in litigation. So when DPD agreed to allow us to be present, and there are still some departments that don't allow that, that also changed a lot in terms of representation of officers.
I think that's a huge point. When people say, well, if you didn't do anything wrong, you don't need an attorney, or, I don't know why you think you need to have an attorney in there. You don't have to have done anything wrong to be accused of a crime. We're seeing that in Dallas County right now. We have people indicted that didn't commit a crime, officers. But the other thing, too, that I always try and express to people is the lawyer's not in there to help me create a lie or manufacture a lie. You're not going to give up your 48-year career to help me make up some scam or some story. And even the bigger point of that is now everything's on video. It's audio recorded. It's on body cam. It's on car cam. Yep. Probably on 12 people standing around with their cell phone cam. It's on surveillance camera. The facts are what they are.
Well, and it even goes back to even like last session with Senator West filed the bill of duty to report, right? TMPA's legal plan, we did not provide an attorney for witnesses, but then we, as field reps, had meeting after meeting, and so we were not providing attorneys at that point in time to a witness. Let's just say, an example, me and Bob got into a shooting, and I witnessed it. TMPA wasn't providing attorneys then. But now, since this duty to intervene is what I'm referring to, now with everything going on, we're providing that attorney because of everything going on. And so that's another aspect of it, because whatever I provide as a witness statement, the department can come back and say that I'm falsifying that.
Or why didn't you stop Bob from shooting?
Exactly. And so depending on what district attorney or what county that you live in or work in, they can come back depending. So that's why we as an association are always trying to evolve and trying to assist our members and go off y'all's recommendation, the attorneys that we have working for us.
And when you're in the middle of, a shitstorm, I mean, whether it's a shooting or some kind of event that's led to an investigation, you're not always going to be thinking of things that are facts in the case that need to be articulated in the right way, okay? And so having assistance with that isn't changing the case, but it's making sure that your perspective and your side of the case is being articulated in a way that the investigators and others that are going to see this and address it at some point in time in some forum will be able to understand what you went through and why you did what you did.
Well, Tyler, you said perfect. As the law evolves and how things are prosecuted evolves, legally things have to evolve too, because that's in the 60s. If you shot at somebody and missed, you just picked casings up and went to the house. And I'm like, dear God, what did you say? And he goes, yeah, if you didn't hit anybody, it's like, oh, good, no blood, no harm, no foul. We'll go to the house.
It might be like that in some places in Texas. So.
Well, a miss shooting was looked at differently, even my early days, but it's no longer that way.
And now you're better shooting a human than a dog. Yeah. I mean, you shoot a dog in some places, you're going to get in the media.
Well, I mean, look at that. 10 years ago, you would have never thought to sign an attorney. But these days, some depending on, just like you said, and I like the way you articulated that. If you have to evolve, and you can't treat every single situation the same. It depends on the circumstances, and it depends on what's going on. Right. So, I think you said it best.
And the emotional side of what, particularly with an officer-involved shooting, what an officer goes through. And, I've only been there from being on the other side, the other chair, but not from a shooter standpoint. But what I know from talking to officers, obviously the literature, being trained by people that are experts in the field of how the psychology works after a shooting, and everyone that's involved in one goes through different emotions. They're not all the same, but they're not in a position to fully think through and discuss all the facts, even sometimes many days later. And so it's just critical to have someone with you that can help you through that. It's a privileged conversation, because your companion officer, that's not privileged. So you might have officers and people that will talk to you about it and help you through it, but it's also helpful to have someone that you can talk to without any concerns about it being used against you later.
Yeah. And privilege Bob's referencing is defined in the penal code. Clergy penitent, doctor privilege, and attorney-client privilege.
Essentially, those are the three primary ones. Yes.
The evolution of an attorney being able to be present really changed the dynamics of officer-involved shootings. I worked them at Garland, and it's not an adversarial event. And I know years ago when I was working them, a walkthrough was a given. Have you seen a shift in that with everything being videoed? Are there as many walkthroughs, or are we still participating in the volume of walkthroughs?
Very, very rarely will we do any kind of a walkthrough. At times, we might, as lawyers, tell the investigators, here's some things that you might need to know or want to know. Mm-hmm. It's coming from us. It's not our client making a statement. There could be a unique circumstance, or there'd be a reason to have the officer say anything in front of the investigators. When I say, we're talking soon after the event, at the scene, so to speak. That was something for a long time we did, but it was done, no recordings. It was done typically with only the CID people, not the IA people involved. But just things have changed because now all the investigators pretty much pull out their phone and start recording, and they go up to the witness officers immediately and are trying to get statements. We used to get out to the scene of a shooting and even have an opportunity sometimes to speak to the other officers. It's sometimes not as easy now because of the way that's handled. So, David Brown, and we had a lot of disagreements with David Brown in Dallas. He is the first chief to actually take a position. I don't want you to get a statement from the officer for 3 days. A lot of people were critical of that. We actually thought at times that was too much time, because our client wants to, after they've gotten through at least a sleep cycle or two, or is ready to, we're going to talk to the investigators, and I want to move on. I want to go back to work.
Yeah, get back on that horse.
So sometimes there were times, we would actually, day or two later, our client, I think we're ready to visit with you. No, we can't do it. She won't let us. So, the walkthroughs it would be a very unusual circumstance where I can't imagine doing a full walkthrough for sure, but in terms of even some dialogue where our clients making any kind of a statement immediately after. And we've even come to the point now that, the Rangers who work a lot of these shootings obviously DPS cases, but also some of the counties and the communities outside the bigger cities. And they're understanding and realistic and prepared now when we have one that they're not going to get anything from our client, immediately after.
I think that also comes with your tenure and your experience. They kind of have known the Bob, the Gorsky law firm name, though.
Because DPS has never put a policy in writing on how an officer-involved shootings handled from the standpoint of the lawyer role. They won't. Yeah. They told us that we can be out there, they have no problem, but they weren't going to put it in writing. Well, they have. It's been very recent. I haven't heard about it. I don't think they have, but yeah. So, but we have, you have to train, and I don't mean that in a demeaning way, but by going out to these cases and dealing with the rangers and dealing with investigators in different departments, we hope at some point in time they get to a point, okay, they understand what our role is. They understand that we're not there to screw with them. We're there to protect their officers in their department, just like they would want protection if they were involved.
I think there's a level of mutual trust that gets built that they understand and respect what you need to accomplish, and y'all understand and respect.
That's what I hope we've done,
for sure.
And we'll continue to do.
There may not be a policy, but the training that I went to put on by Rangers it's a 48-hour period. That's what the Rangers are teaching, and that's what the Rangers are teaching other Rangers is 48 hours is what they're not asking.
Wasn't always that way, though.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, and that's because of Bob Gorsky.
10 years ago. So.
Yeah, and sleep pattern and so forth.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, those REM cycles of sleep that Bob referenced, you hear a fog of war, you hear people not understanding what just occurred due to the larger the stress, sometimes the larger the critical incident amnesia they have. And when your mind mines that information is during REM cycles of sleep. And so it's a reason we always tell you if you've been involved in a shooting or a critical incident, don't go home and drink, because alcohol diminishes your REM sleep. And it's during REM sleep specifically where you have this movie reel with these scenes that are missing, these chunks of space that you can't recall. It's REM sleep when your mind mines those information and recalls some of that information. And there's been numerous studies done, and Force Science is a key to some of this research, that during REM cycle sleep specifically helps people's memory recall. And it's best to get a statement that's accurate than fast. And so rather than showing up on scene, getting a statement and getting some statement that may be 50% accurate, there's not a point in that. Right. Versus 48 hours later when they've had 1 or 2 REM cycles of sleep and they can give you a accurate assessment of what occurred. And then Bob mentioned maybe 72 hours is too long. And there's been discussion, is there a sweet spot in there? Because you can have corruption of that recall. They watched the news, they read an article, a buddy called and said you didn't shoot twice, you shot once, and another buddy calls and says you shot 6 times, not twice. So now they're not sure. Is there a sweet spot you feel like when there's a good, accurate recall?
In my experience and currently at my point in my life and my age, I don't get up at 2 a.m. and go out to these like I did years ago.
Yes, sir.
Okay? I'm fortunate to have wonderful lawyers in our firm that do a tremendous job. So, they may have different thoughts on their more recent experience, but, a day or at least 1 sleep cycle, if not 2. But, and there could be times that 3 days isn't a problem. It's just that I know we had cases where we were ready because our client was anxious to move forward, but, and there are probably people of science out there that might have different opinions on that, what's best. But and I don't know how many times I've had officers focus immediately after a shooting when we were first talking with them, focused on some aspect of the incident that may not be of any significance in terms of their
relevance,
but they continue to repeat it. I just remember that belt buckle he was wearing, or and they keep repeating over and over. And this is when we're out there at the scene, which is another reason why you don't want to be out there. Okay, now let's try to put it all together and do a walkthrough, or put it all together and go write a statement immediately thereafter. So and there are ways. Look, from an investigator standpoint, they want to get information, they want to work the case, but we're never gonna if we know something about that affects an apprehension or where the weapon might be, I know one time I saw an officer put a gun that was lying in the street because there were kids coming up to a block before the CID people got there. They put it in the trunk of a squad car. First thing I did is tell them where the gun was. You guys didn't need to look there because I saw an officer put that away because there were passersby coming by the scene. We're always going to do things like that, but we can do those things. We can communicate those things to the investigators to help them without our client just doing a full-blown walkthrough.
Well, it got me thinking, you guys can be there to assist. One of the first shootings I went out on, one officer's standing, one officer's kneeling. They're giving commands to a lady with a gun across the street, and she ultimately raises the gun at them, and they fire. One was standing, one's kneeling, so the one kneeling, the one standing's gun's going to be right by his head. And during the interviews, they asked the one standing, hey, what'd you see? What do you got? And he goes, well, she came out with a gun. I was giving commands. When she pointed the gun, I shot. Okay. Did the other officer shoot? Nope. Did he give any commands? Nope. So then we go talk to the officer that was kneeling. Hey, what happened? Well, there was a lady came out with a gun. She was pointing the gun at us. We kept giving her commands. She pointed the gun, and we shot. I said, okay, you the only one that shot? Yep, only one that shot. Did you the only one that gave commands? Yep, I was the only one that gave commands. That's their truth. I mean,
right.
That's their, that would be their statement.
They each had blocked out what the other one was doing.
Yeah, and
they were their focus.
And if they both gave a statement that they were the
Yeah.
only one that gave a command and the only one that gave a shot, is that the truth? It's their truth.
Right.
I mean, it's not, and it needs an attorney to help
Right.
understand and explain that is their truth. That's not the truth. That is their truth, and that makes it the truth. I mean, that was their perception,
Right.
and I guarantee you they would have both passed a polygraph
Right.
that they were the only one that gave a command and they were the only one that shot, and
Right.
that's just not what occurred.
Right.
But without having somebody there that can help navigate through that, it'd be easier for somebody to show up and go, they're both lying.
Right. Exactly.
So you started with DPA and then DPSOA in what year?
78 when I was licensed.
And
Yes.
then in what year did TMPA approach you? And
I think that was about 1990. Whenever Jim Lyde was the executive director, or whatever his title was at that time.
Okay.
I think Jim was the leader that really got the legal going. Now my recall is that TMPA was around before CLEAT, and CLEAT was started by some people who were TMPA that formed the CLEAT organization. But then the legal part of it, the representation, I think was either dormant or limited until they really got organized with a legal plan. And I want to, if I had to pick a date, I want to say, and your historians in the building could help you with this better than I can, was maybe in the early 90s,
Okay.
early 90s. And then we started, I know, locally, the suburbs, I think Plano was probably a very early one that was
Yep.
affiliated, and Garland might have had some. I'm not sure Garland.
Plano
moved
very
around,
early on,
but
for
Plano
sure.
for sure. And so we began representing officers, in the local area through that had TMPA affiliation.
Yeah.
I had to hire Bob at Plano PD as a jailer when I was about 19 or 20.
that doesn't shock me.
1992, I think it was. I had to hire an ex-girlfriend. Decided to call internal affairs when I broke up with her. Thank you for that,
We
sir.
got a few of those cases actually. Not from you, right?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that too.
Man, so you've got almost 50 years of experience as a pro labor law enforcement,
Yeah.
really attorney. What, I guess, if you could sum that up and give one advice, I guess, to the listener, watcher, voyeur, to people listening to this podcast, advice from a 50-year plus experienced.
Well, this is going to be simple, but it's going to be obviously focus on what you're taught, rely on your training, be honest, okay? I mean, not being truthful will get you fired. It will get you fired because you will not find a prosecutor that's going to want to sponsor your testimony. And even if you've got a forgiving chief, if you have a serious, and you know, some departments couch things like, well, it was a misleading, and they try to work their way around it in certain cases. But if the prosecutors determine, and there are some counties where the prosecutors are very strict on who they're going to sponsor as a witness, your department may not have any choice.
Yeah.
And so, you know, but focus on what you've been trained to do. Realize you're watched all the time. You're going to be on some video, and so you have to be careful with not only what you do but what you say. It's difficult. I mean, and it's difficult because you're put in these situations where you've got to make life or death decisions, and a lot of people are going to criticize you. Many people might praise you, but you're going to be criticized, but you're just going to have to focus on how you've been trained and prepared to do the job.
One of the things that I find interesting is the fact that a lot of our members, they think because they have a legal plan, and they do have the Bob Gorskys, the Greg Kagels, the David Willises, the John Wolfs across the state, is that they can not so much do whatever they want or make a mistake, is that they can rely on you guys to kind of bail them out. And the fact of the matter is that you make a mistake like that, and being dishonest is probably the most egregious. You can't do that and then call you one of the most prestigious attorneys in the state and expect you to get them out of that. And that's one point that I want to make very obvious about this one episode, just like you hit on. Be honest. It's not hard. That is one thing out of this entire. If you do that, you're good.
We'll do our best, but we can't change
that's
the
right.
facts.
Yeah, that's right.
Not miracle workers.
Yeah, that's right. And also, don't call us when it's the ninth inning. Clint says it best. Don't call us when you're, 10 runs down the ninth inning. Call us immediately when it's the first. When you know you're in trouble and you know that trouble's on the horizon. That way, we can get the Bob Gorskys and stuff involved early on, so we can get kind of a game plan.
And that goes for any type of
that's right.
administrative complaint,
yes.
issue occurs. It never hurts to call and say, hey, look, here's what's going on. If they don't call us directly, they call or at least a rep.
Yep.
And say, maybe I should just at least touch base with the lawyer because I think something's coming.
Yeah.
Before they've done anything.
And to both y'all's point about integrity, Garland, when I got hired, was a bunch of crusty a lot of prior Marines and just old school style leadership. And I loved that. I'll never forget they called us all in and said, we can fix a whole lot of shit that you break. Wreck a car, whatever. But if you lie, we're going to fire your ass. And I thought, holy crap. They said, you can have an accidental, you can do a lot of stupid crap, and we can figure out how to work through it. But if you lie, you're gone. And it is a strong statement when you're young, but when you look at it from where we're looking at it now, it's true.
Still
you
applies.
can work through a lot of stuff.
Right.
Once you lie and you publish that lie, you're done. You're done in this industry. Something I wanted to hit on before we get out of here, and you mentioned Brady.
Yeah.
We get calls, if not daily, every week. I got put on the Brady list. I got to put on a do not sponsor list. I got put on this, and our answer often is, if it's not adversely affecting your employment, there's nothing you can do. If you get fired, we can assign an attorney. But simply being on a list is not an adverse action. And if it doesn't, there's a lot of agencies that go, oh, good, keep doing your job. We don't care what that says. Short of a legislative change, is there anything you recommend? Is there any? Brady's a big bumbled mess, and
right.
We have legislators screaming that they have due process and they're owed due process. But for Brady, there's no due process.
Well, there are times when we can at least, we being the lawyers, can at least try to find out more about why something has occurred in dealing with the DA's office. And, I can't tell you that it's going to be an easy fix if a DA is determined we just don't want this person testifying, okay? They should at least reach out so that their attorney can at least try to find out what's going on, what's caused this. Is this something we can cure in some way? I mean, this is assuming it's not job threatening for the officer. Okay. But you can't retry those issues. I mean, you don't have a forum to know that you can, okay, I can get this immediately fixed. It's got to be done through working through with the prosecutors. And the prosecutors have discretion, a lot of discretion right now.
And there's no, for our listeners, there's no right that we have as a member or you have as an attorney to force any venue or hearing or
no.
They can just tell you to go pound sand.
Right. And I think there were some efforts to try to get some kind of way to challenge that, but I don't think that's.
And you mentioned DAs have a lot of power right now. I'm sure in your time you've seen change, because there was a time even, and I've not been around this near as long as you, there was a time where I thought DAs and law enforcement were not on the same team, but we're certainly heading in the same direction, the very same direction. And in some of our large areas, one of them we're sitting in right now, it's not even we're headed in the same direction. It's completely adversarial.
There are prosecutors that come into office or run for office with the idea, I want to indict a cop.
Yeah, and we're in Austin right now, and he publicly announced he's looking to hire prosecutors that are ready and looking to prosecute law enforcement. And do you see that? Do you see that pendulum ever swinging back? Do you see a?
I think political pendulums always swing or tend to over some point in time. I don't know Austin as well. I hear the stories, and I'm familiar with some of the cases here. You know, Dallas County is obviously gone to that point. Not maybe as bad as it is down here,
but on their heels.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're charging officers in the protest cases with using a deadly weapon.
By threats.
Yeah, so in cases that we never would have seen before. But the politics in Dallas County have changed. I mean, it was one time that it was very Republican, and now it's very Democrat. So I can't say that won't change at some point in time, at least up there. And it's not something we see, in every county, obviously. You can go up to Collin County, and I think officers get a much fairer shake up in Collin County. And it's not very far away from Dallas. But, someday that might change. I mean, we just have to deal with what we've got at the time.
Yeah. Well, there was a glimmer of hope in San Francisco. They recalled the DA, and I thought, man, maybe that will. I don't want anybody to cover for the police, lie for the police, but to pervert the law to prosecute the police is that's a complete opposite of seeking justice.
Yeah. So I always hope things will change for the better where we are having those kind of difficulties, and I don't want to rule that out. That will change at some point in time.
Well, you got anything else, Clint?
What do we not hit, Mr. Gorsky?
What did we not hit? Well, I think you hit all the highlights.
We did 48 years and 48 minutes. 48 minutes, we got it.
Well, Bob, we always do 3 rapid-fire questions.
All right.
Clint's kind of soft on the second question, but I think, and y'all probably talked about the second question because you guys talk a lot. So he probably coached you up on the second question, but it's three rapid-fire questions.
Okay.
Best cop movie or line from a cop movie is question 1. Question 2 is best cop car. And 3, your best drink of choice when you like to relax.
Okay. Let me start with the drink. Tito's and soda with a lime.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lime. I used to be only bourbon and soda, but now I've kind of gone into the Tito's and the vodka. But I like bourbon as well.
I like Tito's.
All right. Now, best cop car. You like talking about vintage, or
I'm just talking about just the best all-time cop car.
Wow.
That you're
okay, and of course, not having driven one. Okay.
Right.
I actually like the SUVs that I see around.
Okay.
I hear a lot of people seem like complaining about the SUVs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like them. I like them. Maybe I've heard that more from the troopers. I don't know. I like the SUVs just in terms of the look. Okay.
I do too. I do too.
Best cop movie. Best cop movie.
Or line from a cop movie.
Or line from a cop movie. Wow. It's probably Al Pacino doing something. Okay, it's Al Pacino. I'm a big Al Pacino fan.
I like
okay?
Pacino.
I often tell people when I was young in my late 70s, 80s, the girls thought I looked like Al Pacino. Now people tell me I look like Shecky Green. So I actually like that movie Heat with De Niro.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
I can't remember a line. The lines that I remember from shows are usually like the mobster ones, like a Sopranos type. I mean, those things stick with me. But I really liked Heat.
It was a good movie.
It was a good movie.
I just could, but I like anything, Pacino.
Yeah.
Him and De Niro were good.
Yeah,
at
they
that.
were.
And I think almost like they never really worked together in the movie. Did you know that?
Oh, no.
I read that they cut the scenes when you're together at a table. It's like one scene where they're together in a restaurant and it's doubles when they were filming it. That's and
I'll have to rewatch it now.
Yeah, you might look that up. I read that somewhere, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't want to get out of here without asking about your mom and dad.
Mom and dad are actually for almost 102, and my mom just turned 99. My dad will be 102 in November.
Wow.
So
That's
he still
awesome.
plays the stock market and sends me emails every day, and he's an amazing person to live through what he's lived through, veteran, and the whole bit. And I will, if I can finish, Zach complained to me when I did the ATO podcast that I did not mention him enough. So I've mentioned him, I think, twice.
Three times.
And I just said 3 times.
3 times.
And I'll say his name
Say
one more time.
Who is that?
Zach Horn.
Zach Horn? Who is Zach Horn again?
He's a guy that clerked for me and wouldn't leave when he graduated, so he is still there in our building.
He went to a college, I think, just down the road from here.
Yeah.
Some, what is the college, I think?
I think it's like Oklahoma.
That's right. Yeah.
We could get Mata
Eastern State or Oklahoma. Yeah.
We could get Mata to come criminal trespassing.
So now I've fulfilled my mission. I've mentioned him now.
I'll say his name one more time. I'm on the phone with Zach about 4 or 5 months ago. We're talking and he's laughing. I said, "What are you doing?" "I'm reading my daily stock market update." I said, "Oh, what is that? An app or what is that?" "That's Bob's dad."
That's right.
Bob sends me an email.
Yeah.
"This stock that you're in's not doing good. You need to look at this stock because you're not doing really good."
That's awesome.
There you go. Hey, I'm proud of everyone that works at the firm.
Oh, you should be, man. You got a hell of a team.
I've been blessed, and I don't want to carry this longer than you need to go, but I've been blessed. The people that have worked with me, not for me, but work with me for many years. Going back to Mike Kronig, who worked here as a legal advisor in Austin, but Mike was the first lawyer I hired as a employee working for me. He was the first one back in 90-something. He was just came out of DPD, went to law school. And I've been blessed to have those kind of people around me. That's,
And always, they're like the New England Patriots. They continue to find really good free agents and the attorneys. You guys, literally before you got here, we're in there, my phone rings and it's a member. And he is a witness to a large deal that's really a mess. And he said, "Yeah, you guys assigned me some guy named Robert Rogers." And when I had my interview with some federal authorities, they asked if I had an attorney to help me navigate it. And I told them Robert Rogers. And they were like, "Oh, damn, he's a really good lawyer." And he said, "I didn't know who he was, but I was very glad to hear that out of their mouth, that I had somebody really good in my corner."
Right.
And
Robert's a former prosecutor and has tried every type of case, and that's one of the things that Robert, before him, Robert joined us when John Herring retired, and before that, Bob Baskett, who still leases space from us, does some work for TMPA, and those guys with criminal law experience that could try any type of case. That's something that we've been very fortunate to have in our firm for my career, and of course before that, Burleson and the guys at Burleson, Peg, Gibson. So, and we really appreciate TMPA and everything TMPA has done for us as well, and to have that association over these now, I guess with TMPA, at least 30 some years,
30,
yes,
30
almost 33, yeah,
years. Has just been a blessing for us. So thank you guys.
they all have amazing sense of humor. My son was at college at UT and was interning in the summer for them. And the first time he ever saw a dead body, DPD got in a little gunfight with a sex offender, and he was deceased in the street. They're standing outside the crime scene, and my son's never seen a dead body in college. And a few of the Bob Gorsky attorneys tell my son, you need to go out there and tell that homicide detective that you're going to need his sport coat since you're a broke college kid. My son said, what? He goes, go out there and tell him there's no bullet holes in it, and he's not going to need it. You sure could use and my son's like, calling me, he's like, I'm not supposed to do this because they're telling me I have to go do this. They're just messing with you. You're fine.
And I'm not going to take credit for that one.
Bob, it was great having you on, man. We enjoyed it.
Enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys stay safe out there. Hit that subscribe button. Man, it's been a great episode. Linton, you got anything else?
Thank you for what you do and the firm does to continue to allow us to be represented professionally and do our job as professional as possible. And no matter the adversity that we face sometimes with the movements around the country, it's really comforting to know you still have access to the best lawyers in the country.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Stay safe.
This is probably going to be the week of conference, so you guys stay safe. We'll look forward to this week being 2023 73rd TMPA conference. It's going to be a good week. You guys stay safe. God bless you, and as always, may God bless Texas. We're out.